really enjoy fabricating mythologies and creating kind of bubbles of different reality for people. So that was a book that I did that has lots of basically fake mythologies in, and also real mythologies. So you got the Hand of Glory from Warsaw Museum, next to a mythological ivory scythe, also known as the husband's bane, that was used by a mythological woman in America who used to get married and inherit, and then get married and then inherit. And so it was kind of like her, secret power of bad husband slaughter.
Right, okay.
I have a genuine love for the Black Country because it's kind of weird being from Warsaw, but now actually living in the Black Country. Yeah. I'm very aware of the interesting tensions and the fact that nobody actually cares if you're from the Black Country or not, but they care if you pretend to be from the Black Country.
I know exactly what you mean, being from Birmingham.
It must be interesting, kind of, because you've kind of got it from the different side. But you've been here for 9-10 years, so
9 or 10, yeah.
So you're kind of considered like getting towards maybe putting in an application to be local.
Perhaps, yeah, I think so. I'm kind of on the cusp. I'm not sure you ever can be, even though the people are really, really friendly, and it's much more sort of down to earth than Birmingham is.
It is that whole thing. It's like acceptance is really, really easy.
Yeah.
But there is always that kind of you're the person who brings things from outside. I did a project basically looking at the Black Country dialect. The idea was that we had bursaries to spend time working in a particular area. I ended up working around Albury and looking at specifically the Black Country dialect in Albury.
Right.
Because Black Country dialect changes depending on where you are. So I ended up doing this project called The Town of Four Moons, looking at the kind of like more romantic area and that whole... the very beautiful way people put things like incredible light pollution, and also a project that's ongoing called the Countess, which is kind of very much like this in respect of it's about the cant and it's about that natter, and one of the things that I love about the Black Country is that whole thing of you still have people like Elaine in Langley, where you can go in and you can find out who's had a kid, who's moving house, who needs this, who needs that, who needs the other, and you find yourself like just kind of becoming so incredibly involved in your local area without even having to think about it. And when I was growing up in Warsaw, the people were very much like that, and it kind of feels like where you have places that are so dedicated to kind of, again, not excluding anybody, but celebrating the fact that they are of that geographical location.
I find dialect fascinating, and I've got family in Newcastle, who all have real thick Geordie accents, and I've always kind of thought there's a lot of similarities between the Black Country and Newcastle. It's almost...
It has
I want to say alien, but that's not a nice way of putting it. It's just really... It really defines them and separates them. Yeah,
it's that wonderful cadence of, and I think that both Newcastle and the Black Country accents have kind of had the same sort of disparaging remarks about them, but they're both the oldest local dialects that there are, and they're very much kind of based around almost before there was the vowel shift, like in late Tudor times, where things became a lot less Germanic and a lot more French almost.
Yeah.
So but they both have that amazing, almost hypnotic.
Yeah, it's the way it kind of just trips along, doesn't it? It's like
It's the thing that telly shows especially always get wrong about that kind of regional accent.
They really do.
They make them slow and laborious, whereas it's like no, it's that beautiful delicacy, and it's that energy coming through it, but making it so wonderfully resonant. But the Countess project is something that I'm kind of carrying on with, because I want there to be a contest in every town. I would love to do a project at some point where there is literally a contest in every town that anybody can go up to and natter to. Just in a shop somewhere, just hanging out, just a bunch of people nattering. You come in and you're invited to join in the chat.
Yeah.
But as a kind of more longer term and easier sort of way to get that started, I've been collecting things like old local tales, cures for colds.
Yeah, it's amazing sort of social value in something like that as well.
Absolutely, and it is entirely about trying to make that, trying to keep that sense of people talking and people communicating, and actually having a safe space where people know they can go in.
Yeah.
But into kind of probably where I've been more recently, I did a really big project with Multi-Story, who are based in West Bromwich, and it was a commission for the Blast Festival that ran last summer. So it was the 6 Towns of Sandwell, Festival of Photography, Walks and Talks. So I made a bunch of objects. Okay. Because, you know, it was the 45th anniversary of Sandwell becoming a municipal borough. Right. And I love the fact that Sandwell is Sandwell because nobody would actually allow any of the other towns to actually call it them. So it couldn't be the, you know, Metropolitan Borough of West Brom or Oldbury or Rowley Regis. And because Rowley had the kind of like whole Regis thing and it had incorporated Worley and so on, I think that Rowley might have thought it was a bit of a shoo-in to kind of be like, oh yes, it's the borough of Rowley Regis now. But they just ended up, because they couldn't agree, having to go for Sandwell, which was the name of a priory that I think got destroyed during the Reformation.
Okay.
So I made a bunch of relics, so one for each of the towns. So for Rowley Regis, it was the Bibble Crown, referring to the Rowley Rag Stone that basically built the road infrastructure of Victorian Britain, to be honest. But my absolute favourite, was the one I did for Tipton.
Okay.
So this is the skull of the Slasher's monkey.
Oh, that's very cool.
It's one of the favourite pieces of work I've ever made, to be honest, because the actual form of it's kind of based on medieval saintly relics, but also South American death rituals.
Yeah, it's definitely a South American feel to it, definitely.
So you kind of got both of those sort of informing the baboon skull, but the reason why it's a baboon skull is because it's a relic for Tipton, and the Tipton Slasher was... are you familiar with the tale of the Tipton Slasher? No. Victorian bare-knuckle boxer, started off on the canals and used to basically demand to go through the locks first by challenging the other chap to fist fight. Okay. And whoever won would go through the lock first, and back then that was a big deal because obviously it was very, very busy. Locks take ages to get through, but he got a reputation, started sponsoring himself for fights and things like that. So yeah, he was legendary, world champion, world heavyweight champion, and
did he have a baboon?
He had a pet baboon.
Seriously?
Seriously. He had a pet baboon when he was on the barges. So
how did he keep a baboon? Aren't they're meant to be like really vicious?
Yeah, apparently him and the baboon used to fight. I've heard all of these tales about him and this baboon. But when the baboon died, he had it stuffed, and
he sounds like that sort of guy.
He retired, top of his game to run a pub. So had the stuffed baboon at the end of the bar. So the regulars put pipes in its hand and hats on it and stuff. And then he'd been retired 10 years, and a younger guy, a middleweight, said, "I'll fight you for the belt," and he went, "All right then." So he did train. He sold everything. He sold his pub, he sold his jewellery, he sold literally everything to put on himself to win. And then he lost in 10 rounds. So
10 rounds bare knuckle. That's...
Yeah, because he just thought, oh well, I'm a heavyweight. This chap's a middleweight. I'll flatten him. But he was 10 years out of training. So the skull of the Slasher's monkey is the relic of knowing when to stop. Because the monkey itself is in the archive of the Black Country Museum, but they can't move it. They can't put it on display. It's too delicate because it's like, you know...
That's an amazing story.
It's like near enough like 150-year-old monkey, and it's just kind of there in perpetual facepalm going, oh, Bill, what were you doing? You're out of shape, mate. So basically I made a relic like that for each of the towns.
I imagine this hasn't been made to be held.
Actually, it was.
Because it's just quite tactile. Like
it is wonderfully tactile, and I've always been really frustrated by not being able to touch the things in museums.
Yeah.
And I understand why. I absolutely 100% understand why. But with this, because it was basically making these objects for like a 6-week festival, one for each town. So I made a full cabinet of curiosities, made one of these type of objects for each town. And then when the Blast Festival was focusing on that town in the weekend, I would take their particular object. I don't have any of the actual cards, but you can make a 3rd class relic from any 1st or 2nd class relic by holding an object against it. So what I was doing was inviting people to create their own relic by taking a coin, holding it against the relic, crying, "Imbue!" So imbues it with the power
right, of the monkey.
Of the monkey. So this is now a 3rd class relic of Tipton and knowing when to stop. And I've also been inviting people to have their photo taken with it and printed out on my special machine.
That's very cool.
Would you like a photo of you and the monkey?
Yes, please. Okay.
Excellent stuff. Okay, and that should, at some point, be a delightful picture.
Me and the Slasher monkey.
Of you and the Slasher's monkey.
Been a while since I shook a Polaroid.
And have you imbued yourself a coin so that you've got a relic to take home with you?
How do I do it again?
Right, you just choose a coin, any coin.
Yeah.
Hold it against the Slasher's monkey skull. Say imbue.
Imbue.
And there you go. It is that simple.
Fantastic.
I'm glad you enjoyed your.
No, it's been lovely talking to you. Cheers.
Cheers.
The arts have never really sort of excited me.
Yeah.
Art is a picture on the wall, in my opinion.
Oh, okay. Cool.
If it stands out to me, I like it. If it
doesn't,
it doesn't do a lot for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Basically, art's about dealing with everyday things. It's not for me and a lot of artists. It's not just kind of it's this pretty thing that doesn't really have any effect on people. It's taking what's actually sort of happening. So you get artists who are dealing with like things like the Grenfell Tower incident, and that's sort of very much the subject matter, and dealing with everyday things that matter to them. But a lot of my practice focuses around nuclear technology,
Right.
and sort of how we kind of deal with that. So for me, nuclear is something that was always interested me and always affected me, because my parents did things like have a stock larder in case of nuclear attacks and things like that. So I've got the. I kind of grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, so I kind of had all of the paranoia of nuclear tech, but nobody was explaining what it was because it was going out of fashion. So I've just got this kind of childhood paranoia, but nothing to base it on.
To me, that wouldn't be classed as art. So my perception of art is a picture on the wall with flowers, scenery, doing something about nuclear war or nuclear events. Grenfell to me is not an art form, as you mentioned. Nuclear is not to me as an art form, so that's why I can't understand why it appealed to yourself as an art form.
It appeals to me as a subject matter. I've got a performance coming with the Mac, which is what that's the PR poster for.
All right.
So that's going to be like a 75-minute show where I'm taking all of this research about nuclear technology, carrying it on. And much like you would with a theatrical show, you know, you're going to have to do all that heavy research, and then you produce something that's, you know, people can interact with and see. So that's slightly more on the theatre side of things.
Yeah.
But then one of the other outputs of it is a nuclear survival pack.
Right.
From a sort of genderqueer perspective. So it's got all of the practical things and do feel free to take them out and have a play with them. Because it's that if no one's going to survive a nuclear attack anyway, let's do this in a much more fun way, in a much more interesting way. And by doing all these things like the stage show and the packs and things, it brings up all these conversations about nuclear technology which people don't tend to have, because they go, oh, well, that's a thing from the past, we don't need to deal with that, or that's an American topic, why are you as a British person dealing with that? And it's that it isn't the American thing, because if it does go badly with fallout, the whole globe's affected by nuclear.
With the pack here, I mean, is there sort of like a symbolic with the red button, or is it just a case of?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very literal, you know, the big red button.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So symbolic, yeah, the red button.
Yeah.
The films where, what was it, Peter Sellers' film?
Oh, Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange, where the button's there, the red button's always there.
But again, that's a type of art form.
Yeah.
That's very much, and you know,
because it sticks out in people's mind about that Doctor Strange love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's because they're trying to take whatever medium it is, like whether it is painting on the wall, or whether it is cinema or performance, or and doing something that's not just the standard repetition.
See, me being old-fashioned, this to me, I'm sorry about you.
No.
Is the art form of this is not to me art form.
Yeah.
It depicts how can I say it? What's the word I can say?
Yeah.
An opinion.
Yeah. But then all art will do, even those old paintings that you appreciate and they're on the wall, it's like, that's great, but actually when they were painted, they were really political. Like there's one of Haystacks, I can't remember the artist, but it's one that you see everywhere. It's like Haystacks, and go like that. It's a really nice, pretty picture, and people go, oh, it's countryside, and it's... No, it was entirely a massively political statement about workers' rights.
I mean, you could probably say that same with the Bay, the Bay Tapestry, which I can't. Sorry about.
No, Bay of Tapestry.
To me, that is a historical fact, the way I believe it.
It is a historical fact, but the reason it got commissioned, because the person who actually paid for it to be made, it was about boasting. It was, I mean, still very much this has happened, it's historical recording, but it's also, look how powerful we are, look how rich we are, we can afford to have this tapestry made, and whenever you're seeing any kind of artwork, I mean, it's fine if that doesn't come across and you're just going, that looks good. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, with the show that I'm doing, it's got 75 minutes and there's no dialogue.
Right.
I'm making sure that it looks really visually and interesting. People are going, I haven't got a clue what it was about, but I did like it. Yeah. And that so for me is the most important.
With the show that you're putting on, is it what else is it just about the nuclear side of it, or just anything else, that survival side of it, or the perpetrators of the...
It's kind of, obviously the nuclear stuff and how we survive that or don't. It's also to do with kind of, it's recently the seed bank, which is, they basically took all the seeds from plants and put them in a secure location in the Arctic, inside a mountain, with the idea that if the worst happened to the planet, people in the future could find this and then they could actually regrow stuff. And 2 years ago it flooded because the ice caps are melting, so it's no longer, even our backup isn't safe, so that's kind of in there as well. And I'm queer, and almost all of the material about nuclear war is very much from a straight white male point of view. Like the threads is pretty much the only thing I can think off the top of my head, and that's from a straight white female point of view. Everything else is how the man protects his family. And it's fine that that exists, but it's not fine that that's the only view that people have. It's like, how do you relate to that if you're from a black, Asian, minority ethnic persuasion, or if you're queer, or if you're disabled? There isn't really anything that's kind of how you would survive that, because it's like very much, you can take the doors off your giant house, put them on the wall, go and get all this timber and whitewash the windows, and it's like, it's great. All of that costs a lot of money, and you've got to have a fairly decent house to begin with. If you haven't, you've literally got no advice on it.
But with your sort of like art on this take about the nuclear,
Yeah.
what are you aiming to sort of aim for?
Yeah.
Is it aiming at the specific, like the government's?
Eventually, potentially, but it's much more about the conversations, because so many people sort of go, I kind of forgotten about nuclear, or it doesn't exist, and like the Fukushima disaster that happened in Japan, I think 5 or 6 years ago, where the reactor went critical. They're now saying, we're running out of resources to deal with the nuclear debris from this. We might have to start just putting it into the sea to dissipate it, which obviously if that happens starts to irradiate the oceans. You get things like that coming up, and the Bikini Islands, they initially took all of the debris from the tests, covered it in a concrete sarcophagus, much like Chernobyl, and much like Chernobyl, it's starting to break open and leak into the oceans.
Not saying it never bothered me about it, because I always believe that each government have got their own little nuclear device somewhere.
Yeah.
Which, if it does happen, that button's going to be pressed.
If one goes,
and then one goes, and then after that event, I'm sorry to say, but my perception is that there'll be nobody here.
Yeah, very likely.
It's not to say I don't care about it, like my children, grandchildren, to bring them up into a nice world where I don't want to see the red button.
Yeah, I mean obviously that does bother me, but that isn't kind of what scares me quite so much. What is that a lot of the technologies involved require humans to maintain it, to replace the seals, even down to the nitty-gritty, or to just reprogram something. So even if we don't have a nuclear Armageddon, if we have anything else like the microbeads from plastics, which are starting to get into the ocean, they're starting to get into food, and they're starting to find them in humans, or if we have plague, or if we have any other global disaster that breaks down civilization, then we can't maintain the systems. So it's not even that we're pressing the button, it's that we're no longer able to actually control these things. So in 20 years' time, when they do break down and start to go off or start to go into, we're just as scuppered, but we haven't even pressed the button to do it.
So has the perception of your artistic interpretation of nuclear deter that government to say we're not going to do it?
I think purely in the way that it's sort of it's cause and effect, and like ripples in a pond. It's that sounds silly, but like when you get a really deprived area that's basically dead, you tend to get an art gallery move in because it's cheap and it's where they can afford. There you go, and then a cafe goes in because it needs to. There's a bit of market there, and it starts to build up, and you start to get from that one tiny gallery. It generally starts to sort of go out, and the area gets posher and posher, like Digbeth in Birmingham.
Yeah.
It used to be you don't go to Digbeth. Now it's it's Digbeth, isn't it lovely?
Yeah, it's a Friday night at Digbeth.
Yeah, and it's a similar kind of process with this. It's not that I'm expecting governments to change or big things to change. It's that if people aren't even considering nuclear, then when they are voting for their governments, that's not on their radar. So it'll never get through to the governments that this is an important issue, or that we need to take care of things. I mean, there are nuclear bunkers in Wolverhampton, which how many people know about?
That's what I'm saying. It's trying to portray it into normal households to talk about nuclear deterrent.
Yeah.
I mean, my night is walking in Emmerdale, Coronation Street,
But if
a bit of TV saying
yeah,
something happened with North Korea, or is it South Korea or North Korea, about their nuclear testing. I'm thinking, well, that's X amount of 1,000 miles away from my house. So why should I start thinking about it now?
but then, I mean, if you want to go for the local level, you've got the fact that there's, I think, 13 nuclear reactors in the UK.
Yeah.
Some of them are very badly maintained. The waste from them is currently going over to France, which is going by the Channel. Anything goes wrong with that, we're contaminated. If there are any major accidents, you get radiation fallout, which poisons the food, which means that we can't eat. And the amount of foreign nuclear weapons that are actually on the UK anyway, like with America pulling out of Turkey and leaving 50 or 60 nukes there. Similar with the UK, it's like we don't, the government does, but know how many nukes are actually on the UK soil and how many are trained on the UK's. I think, given the average yield, I think you need about 10 to 12 nukes to take out the entire of the UK, which is nothing. They've got thousands. So, I mean, it does really affect you. But hopefully, maybe in 10 years' time, it's a case of I do things like this and do conversations with other artists do it as well. It becomes slightly more commonplace. So when you do go home and you watch Emmerdale, absolutely grand, because I love Emmerdale. But you get like 2 minutes where it feeds into the conversation that they're having, which then starts to feed into the politicians going, actually, people are talking about this. Maybe it's something we need to address. Oh, thank you very much.
No, quite interesting. I've enjoyed it, the conversation, but like you say, whether that'll stick in my mind tomorrow when I think about the nuclear side of it.
Yeah, it's a triple, and that's the thing. I could have an audience of 100 and get through to one person.
And that's
For me, that's a win.
That's always the same now. You need to get through to the one to make the other ones here.
I obviously don't think in the same ways as an artist thinks, but what I did think was that it was quite accessible to the literal guy in the pub, especially tales about bare knuckle boxers in canals and with pet baboons and stuff. I thought that was really fascinating and really engaging. So yeah, I got quite a lot out of it from that perspective.
My interpretation about Alex's nuclear, how can I say it, perception, I don't think much of it, it's hard to explain. Yes, it's in the back of my mind about the nuclear warheads or whatever we have, but my own perception, I do not believe it to be an art form. To me, it's a political statement. If you see what I'm saying, it's hard to explain.
A lot of people think that art is anything that makes you stop and think about something a bit differently than you did before.
Yeah.
So does that change how you? Had you thought about it in that way before?
Never thought about it as an art form.
No. You're thinking about it without any sort of politics.
That's it. And
is it something that you could think about as something different?
I don't believe so.
No.
I don't think it, to me, is an art form.
But from my perception, that's totally fair enough, because ultimately a lot of contemporary art especially is really difficult to get into unless you've been to art school and done all of that stuff. Alex, far more than me, deals with the very
now I'm interested.
it's the very, very difficult and weird and random stuff, and it's, from my perception, it's very much about really kind of looking at that really deeply. It's the same kind of thing as the difference between having a microwave in your kitchen and the entire space race. And so you've got the entirety of the space race, and that was ridiculous. It was posturing between America and Russia, but then the stuff that came out of that's really useful for life the microwaves, things like space blankets. How many lives have emergency blankets saved over the past 20 years? That is the pictures that you hang on your wall. That is the bit that is the stuff that you see and you think, oh, that's bloody beautiful, that's amazing, I really like that. But the whole space race, I don't care about the space race. I find it interesting, vaguely, but as far as getting rockets off the ground, I know nothing about it. But equally, I know that if I get hit by a car, I want someone to be covering me with a space blanket, because that's going to keep me ticking over until the ambulance arrives. And that's kind of the difference for me. And that's very much the difference between mine and Alex's practices. I kind of produce something that you can hold and relate to really, really easily. Whereas Alex is dancing to their own tune somewhere. And then in 5 years' time, someone like me may be inspired by Alex to make something wonderful that you can hold. But Alex needs to be out there doing the dancing in rubber and looking at all of the weird bits of atomic culture and all of the things that have happened over the past 50 years. Since Hiroshima. And so it's absolutely totally fair enough that you don't like it as a piece of artwork. You don't want that poster hanging on your wall. But then someone else in 10 years' time who might have seen Alex's work is going to make something absolutely beautiful that you would want to hang on your wall, that relates to the same things but is done in an entirely different way. And I think that that's the really important thing, because you mentioned earlier that you don't think the same, but you totally do. I get obsessive about it, and I take it to a ridiculous extreme.
I'm 61 years old, where someone roughly about 40, between 30 and 40 might have that perception about your art. Like I said, art is...
I think a lot of it comes down to aesthetics and what you interpret and like what you say, like what you'd hang on your wall.
That's it.
To look at. And art's obviously a lot wider than that, but to us, like the guys in the pub kind of thing, it's you guys have a battle on your hands, don't you, to kind of see,
portray,
sort of open people's.
I mean, I am trained as a painter.
Yeah.
My initial point was painting and installation, which is kind of sets, and then going through to performance. So I can still do paintings.
It's
fine. It's just,
and that's what a lot of people.
It doesn't interest me enough.
No, and that's what a lot of people class as art.
Because it's sellable.
Because it's sellable.
It's
and
like
you hang it on your wall and you look at it and you think that's nice.
It's like the pub art, the three dogs with a pool cue and cigarettes.
That's a piece of art.
Hell yeah!
But that's what I'm saying. That's the sort of art that people look at. In my generation, I mean, whether somebody your age may look at that artwork, but my generation is, like you say, is that dog with a pool cue and playing pool.
It is also the time delay fact as well.
Yeah.
It's the fact that the dogs and the paintings weren't really popular at the time, but they've got more popular since it's gone on.
Yeah.
And the stuff that we're doing is really popular until we're
chintz
dead.
factor.
Yeah.
But in 50 years' time, it might bleed into that point. So it's the thing about art is we're never going to get any reward from it.
No.
People who do stuff like I do feeds into people who do stuff like Vicky does, which feeds it. So it's that trickle down. I might get some good feedback. Maybe I'll get I'm not going to sleep tonight. And then Vicky might take something from that she can then use it, and it's like, I can handle that, and it's real and it's there.
It's like the interpretation, like you said, and also I think it also with art is the age gap as well, different art.
The gap between the audience and the artist.
Yeah.
But then you do get people who do the wall-based art, and you do get younger people who do that, and so you'll find that there's a piece of art that you do like, and that is the good thing, is that there's so many different types and it's fine that people like different stuff. It'd be really annoying if everybody liked my show.
Oh yeah.
I want some negative feedback, because otherwise it's like, that's good.
Well, what was the point of doing that then?
I could have done half the work then. you know, it's like, no, I want to try out.
I'd argue as well that you don't. It's not that you don't like it. It's just not your thing. I mean, there's something out there that you would like, so you do.
And
There's art out there that you know that you would enjoy.
I mean,
that you do enjoy.
Like I said, you know, art to me is an appreciation of Sammy's music.
Okay.
I might not like the artist, but I like the music that's been played.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed today because it has been that wonderful opportunity to talk about my work and actually get a totally honest response about it. So, and that's always really valuable. So yes, thank you for thank you for engaging.
I really liked it, and I'm following you on Twitter now.
It's been really nice to have to defend my work quite so sort of strongly.
Yeah.
With the art board, it's sometimes a bit, and you don't have to explain stuff like what live art is.
Yeah.
But it's nice to get into the nitty gritty. It's like, no, it works like this, and put this thing on. Hopefully, I can explain my position. Whether you agree or not, it's totally fine. But I've kind of got that.
Like I said, a lot of art is an agreement, and what you like. That's the way I look at it. It's not anything to do with your perception of art. It's my perception of art as well.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going for the week.
I think you're free.
Done.
I'll be honest, I need to read as well.
Yeah.
I'm going straight downstairs though.